Okay, so now let's go back to our portfolio and work on this. Obviously, we don't want these projects go here. Get rid of that. So what is that we want to do? Well, we want to make sure that we have a list, scrollable list that is, that looks like this. Okay? And that list is going to be fed with this data that is being passed, as you see here. Okay. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we need a way in which we are able to create a list, right? A visual list such as this, which will have these cards as you see here, right? That's what we want to do. But let's start one thing at a time. First, let's accomplish one thing, which is how do we create a scrollable list? Well, luckily, it's really simple in Compose. All you have to do is call this LazyColumn. Okay. Now, the reason why you want to use a LazyColumn is twofold. One, you get the scrollability of the list, whatever contents you're going to be passing in. Number two, you also will get the advantage of recyclable views, which is really important, especially as you are passing in, for instance, a lot of data through. You want to use a LazyColumn. LazyColumn will know how to recycle the views as they are being displayed. So LazyColumn, if you're an Android developer, is like recycler view, but simpler. Okay, so we can pass contents right away like that, or we can just use a lambda. Okay, so like this, and voila. So inside here now, the LazyColumn will require a few things, one of which is the data. In this case, it's going to go through items. I'm going to use items like this because we're going to be passing a list of items. So there are different versions of this lambda or methods. So I'm going to use that one. And inside here, I'm going to pass, of course, our data as such. Once you do that, you notice then we can pass here a parameter, which is going to be each item of our data. So I'm going to call it item like that. And I can use either one of these helps that I have here to say these are just parameters that are being passed through our lambda. Again, lambda, if you never heard of what a lambda is, it's okay. In this case, just think of it as a function that is anonymous and we can pass items through it, but in a more concise way. So I'm going to just use that first option there. So this means now this item is going to be a string, because what would happen here, we're passing this data, which is what we're passing through in our items there. And when that happens, what happens is we are sifting through and getting each one of these items. So if we have 100 strings in our list that we're passing when we call portfolio, then each one of them are going to be held in this item object. Okay. So now I can do whatever I want. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and say text just for now and pass the item like this, because item is a string and that will work. And voila, you can see now, because we're inside of portfolio here and that's inside of content, which means we're calling it here, right? And this has a preview. We can see that we have project 1, 2, and 3. This is really good. So it's working. So if I add more projects, let's copy this a few times as such, and go ahead and refresh. And you can see we have all those projects. Of course, some numbers are being repeated. That's okay, but you get the idea. This is really good. Let me just make sure that everything is aligned like that. Okay, so it's working. Obviously, this is far from what we really want to happen, but it is progress. So let's start small. Now, let's go back to understand the whole idea of what we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do here is that when we click this portfolio button, in fact, when they first run this app and they come to this page, they being the users, we're not going to show anything. So this is going to be hidden, right? It's not until the portfolio button is clicked that we're going to show this. And when we click again portfolio, we're going to hide it. So we're going to toggle this event that happens when we click. And then if it's shown, if we click again, it's going to hide this content area where we have the portfolios. How do we do that? Okay. So let's think a little bit through. So if we go back to our button, because this is where the action happens, right? When we click, we don't want this anymore because we understand that this works and that's all that we needed. We want to make sure when this button is clicked, then this content shows, right? Whatever we have inside of this content. In this case, we have our portfolio here and we're passing project strings, right? That's what needs to be shown. So if that's the case, that means then we have to figure out a way in which we can control the toggling of this button. Meaning if we click, then we want to show. If it's showing, our projects are being shown, then we want to hide that view. That takes us to another concept, which again, we are going to dive really deep into later. Again, we're just trying to get through this so we can see the basics of compose. So the concept here is very simple, is that, okay, we need to create a variable that will control or that will keep this state. It is a very crucial concept that will keep this state whether it's false or true or false, so that we can toggle back and forth this view here when the button is clicked. That just means then somewhere around here, I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to say val, say button clicked state. Now, this is not a simple variable. This is a different kind of variable that is very important in Compose, and we will see into more details later. What this variable must be able to do is to remember the state of the button. And for that, we have a special syntax here. We're going to say is equal to remember. Oh, interesting. Remember, I'm going to pick the first one, and I'm going to use the lambda. Now, what is that we're trying to remember? We need to set that up too. It's going to be a mutable state of, mouthful. At first, it's going to be a false value as such. Okay, let's go ahead and think a little bit through this. So what we're doing here, we're creating a button click state, and we're going to want to remember this state, right? We say remember, and it is indeed, of course, a function, but in this case, a lambda. That's why we have these curly braces. And then inside, we're setting up the mutable state of. So these is the value type that needs to be remembered, which is the mutable state of, and we pass the actual type. In this case, it's going to be a Boolean, so true or false. So in this case, we're saying at the beginning, what are we going to try to remember in the form of this button click variable? It's going to be a false Boolean, but it's very special here. We must do like this, okay? So now we can use this. Now, another thing you'll see, you may end up having squiggly red lines between remember and also mutable state, or both of them. All you have to do is to make the right import. So you have to right click and show context actions, or it will tell you exactly that you need to import, and you go ahead and import as we've done before. It's very important, okay? Very good. But in this case here, you see that I didn't have to do much because it just detected that I needed those libraries and went ahead and got it. In fact, you can see somewhere we have their mutable state of, and we have remember. If you have those issues, just make sure that you import as such. All right, let's come back here. So we have our button click state. So where do we set it or use this? Well, we use it inside of onClick. So the idea is, in the beginning, obviously, this button click state is going to be false, and that's fine because we don't want to show anything. Okay, so when we click on it, we're going to set it. I'm going to say button click state. I'm going to say dot. I'm going to get the value, right? And I'm going to set it to what? I'm going to set it to true, because in the beginning it's always false. But that's not all, because this is going to be just one part of the equation. I want to toggle it between true or false. So I'm going to just put the whatever is the state, we just get the opposite. This is how we toggle it. Okay? So meaning if it's true, I'm going to set it to true. But that's not the whole story, because we don't want it just to, when you click, set it to true and then we're done. Right? We want to be able to say, okay, when that button is clicked, we are going to toggle it. So meaning we're going to take the value that is current, right? I'm going to just copy that, and then we're going to make it the opposite of what it is. So if the value is false, then we're going to toggle to true. If you click again, it's going to be false. So it's going to toggle back and forth. This is how you do it. Okay? There we go. So to see this, if it works, what I'm going to do here, then let's click here, make sure that we're outside of our button. Okay, portfolio is there. So outside here, I'm going to say something. If, right, let's check if this is indeed true. We're going to say if button click state, that value is true, if we just leave it as that. If that's true, if it's true, then I'm going to go and say, call this content like this. It's going to show that content. Else, I'm just going to go ahead and show nothing. But to show nothing, we're going to say box such and pass nothing like this. Let's see if this is true. Let's go ahead and actually run this on an emulator and see. Okay, so there we go. Moment of truth. If I click, voila, you see all the projects are showing, and I can scroll up and down, but since there aren't enough that are filling out the entire space, I don't see the scrolling, but it's okay. If I click back, it's going to hide that. All right, so it is working. This is exactly what we wanted. Okay, so before we go, because this is again too long, I just want to go over again what we did here. So we went ahead and created our content, as we saw before, and we called the portfolio. We're passing data, dummy data, in this case, just strings. When we separated our code a little bit to make it better, we created the actual portfolio composable and passing the list. And inside here, we have the LazyColumn, which is corresponding to recycle view in Android development, which this is still Android development, but a subset of Android development, if you will. This is composed, right? So this takes care of everything. You don't have to worry about adapters or all the things that we had to worry about in traditional Android development. And so we pass that data, and in this case, we're just passing the strings as the rows, if you will. So that's what is happening inside here. Okay, and so when we click the button, first of all, we created this mutable state, and remember here. So it's a very special variable that will always remember a state of this Boolean. And so what we did is when we click, we're going to toggle that button. So if it's true, then it's going to be false when clicked, and vice versa. And when that happens, we're going to attach an if statement to say, okay, if it's true, the button state is true. That means we want the content to show, which in this case, we're going to pull in the content. Else, we're just going to have an empty box. And hence, you're able to see this wonderful effect there. All right, so we're making good progress. And I hope this is making sense. If not, again, don't worry. We are going to go over this so many times. You're going to be so tired and sick of me going over all these great things. But don't worry, I won't get you bored. But this is what we're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you are having lots of fun and this is making some sense, at least. And I hope you're excited.